Hey crafty people, it's Tasha here, welcome back to my channel. I'm sharing a video that I originally shared over on the Heffy Doodle page. I really hope you enjoy it. Today I'm sharing a fun way to use our Stitched Leaves background die. We're going to take the stitched and run with it. So I've got the Stitched Leaves background die itself, Mischief Makers stamps and dies. Then I thought I'd use this falling leaf stencil, but I swapped it up and I actually used the trendy triangles instead. I've cut the die from Nina £80 and I actually started the stitching off camera, so I wasn't sure how it was going to work, but once I saw how it was starting to look, I just had to turn on my camera. I started with these maple-esque leaves and some gold metallic thread. I'm just doing a simple backstitch. So there's two ways that you can do this. Either go around and do the entire leaf as a normal stitch, then when you get to the end, go back around again to fill in those gaps. Or go up through each hole and back down the previous one, which will give you a continuous stitch. This is the method that I prefer, but both of them work perfectly. So the die itself cuts a kind of dashed line which mimics stitching, but if you use a thin needle and thread, you can push your needle up and down through those dashed lines in the same way you would a hole that you'd get in like a traditional stitching die. You do need to be careful not to pull the thread too tight though, as it could rip the cardstock. As you can see from the back, I just went from one leaf straight to the next, and anytime I needed to secure the end of the thread, I used some super strong double-sided adhesive. Just make sure that you burnish that down well onto the thread, just to be sure that it's got a really good grip, and don't cover any of the back of the leaves with tape. Now I'm moving on to the classic leaf shaped ones, and I've swapped to some thin metallic green thread that I've had in my stash forever. I'm doing a different pattern with this one, but I'm still using that same backstitch technique. So I'm going from the center out to the edge and then back through the center and out to the other side. I used each center hole that I made 3 or 4 times, then moved on to the next one up along that center line as I moved further up the leaf. I finished it up with a simple backstitch around the outside just to finish it off nice. After those, I moved on to the last type of leaf and I used a different gold thread for those. Now, I cheated a little because I love how it looked, but I didn't want to spend the time that was necessary to do the entire panel. So I'm going to make it a peekaboo panel. I even did just half of that one green leaf because I knew the other half would be hidden. Work smarter, not harder after all. So let's ink blend a piece that will sit on top of my stitched panel. I started with some grape soda cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, which is a US A2 size. And I have the trendy triangles stencil on there with some memo tape, and I'm ink blending a purple ombre using 3 shades of Catherine Pooler inks. When I had the whole thing blended, I swapped my stencil by flipping it 180 and blended a little more ink on, just using what was left on my blending sponge. That just softens the pattern a little and it gives it some really interesting texture. I darkened the edges of the panel with more of that darkest purple that I'd used because I just love how it looks, but I wanted to up the drama, make it even darker, so I actually added some cool toned grey to really deepen it. This is my favourite way to really deepen up purple ink blending. To add to that, I squirted on some water and let it sit for a few seconds before soaking it up with a rag. Now let's splatter this up some more. I'm using my favourite metallic watercolours and splattering some violet and some gold. I just used a piece of memo tape to flick the brush off, mixing the mixing up that and just tapping the brush over the panel, and that gives it a mixture of droplet sizes. I love how it's looking, and the metallics get even shinier after they dry. So I'd stamped, coloured and die cut images from the Mischief Makers set during a previous crafty session, but I didn't end up using them. So I chose one of those for today's card. Now I need to trim my purple panel to fit over the stitched one, and I really don't want to get that angle or placement wrong. So I made a little bit of a kind of a jig with some Memo tape. So I took a long strip and laid it over the edge of my stitching, sticky side up, right where I wanted the purple panel to finish. Then when I lay my purple panel on, the tape sticks to the back of it. I lifted that up and used that tape as a guide. I can cut the panel exactly where I need to first time. Like I said, smarter not harder. Now my panels are cut and ready to go, I can just use strong liquid glue to adhere them together. Now, to ground my sentiment and image, I used a strip of washi tape from my stash, but because it is a touch translucent, I actually doubled it up and added a second piece on top. I always position my tape so that I have extra on either end. That way I can fold them round to the back, and that's going to keep your washi from ever peeling up. Then my Foxy Lady and Sentiment go up on some foam squares for dimension and to help them stand out on the background. To finish, I added some sequins and a gem from the Firefly Sparkle mix. And that's my card. Finished. I absolutely love how it came out, and it's got me thinking about all of the other dies that could be switched up by stitching on them. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope you like the card and that this has inspired you to try stitching on some of your background dies. I've got that linked too. If you aren't already subscribed, please consider hitting that button and check the bell to be notified whenever I post a new video. Have a lovely, happy, safe and wonderful day. Stay crafty. Bye.